I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your chilling host, and you're about to hear that story and more in today's episode of Terrifying Encounters. Tonight, we'll plunge into the heart of an unexplainable massacre inside a city supermarket, confront the legend of a creature caught between man and monster, and uncover other eerie tales lurking in the dark. If you're already part of our community, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this, drawn out from the darkness and revealed to the world. Now let's begin. The city of Los Angeles never sleeps. But on that muggy late August night, something different lingered in the air, like an invisible weight that not even the drunks noticed. The city still had its lights on, cars passing by with low beams, but there was a strange silence behind it all. A silence waiting to be broken. The clock on Mark Whitaker's phone read 3:07 a.m. when he laughed for the 10th time at some nonsense Carlos Ramirez had said. They were sitting in the back of Red Jack's, a small cramped bar on Fairfax Avenue, known for never having a set closing time. "You don't get it, man," Carlos said, his speech slow and a nearly empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "The woman just straight up disappeared with my toothbrush." "Who does that, man? That's emotional sabotage." "Maybe she was just worried about your dental health," replied Troy Becker, slouched in his seat, eyes half closed. "Or maybe she ran after smelling your breath." Mark laughed, leaning his elbows on the sticky table. Ethan Wells slapped Carlos on the shoulder and raised his glass. "To the women who put up with our emotional garbage. And to the friends who pretend they're fine even when everything's a mess," Devin Miles added, raising his own. "To male decay," Mark said. The glasses clinked, the ice chiming softly. Red Jack's was almost empty, with only 2 other customers dozing in a corner and a dead-eyed waitress wiping the same table for the 5th time. "Last round, gentlemen," she announced without raising her voice. 5 minutes and I'm closing the doors." Carlos got up with effort. "Smoke break before the farewell?" Mark nodded. They stepped out the side door to the sidewalk. The night air was muggy, heavy with the smell of hot trash mixed with dry tar. The city seemed frozen in time. Even for Los Angeles, it was far too quiet. Carlos lit a cigarette and passed it to Mark. Troy stared at the street with a vacant look. "You guys hear that?" he suddenly asked. "Hear what?" Devin shot back. "Nothing?" "Exactly. It's weird. Where are the cars, the traffic? Even the city feels like it's holding its breath." That's when Ethan pointed to the end of the street. "Look at that." A woman was running barefoot, her dress torn, hair disheveled, eyes wide as if she had seen death itself. "Run! Run!" she screamed. The group froze. Right behind her, 2 other men appeared, also running from an alleyway, shirtless, covered in blood, panting heavily, shouting something incomprehensible. Carlos took a step forward. "What the hell is going on?" The screams grew louder. More people appeared. 5, 10. People of all kinds, old, young, dressed for a night out, others in sleepwear, all running from something the group still couldn't see. Devin stepped back, swallowing hard. "Something's coming." "That's not some street brawl," Mark whispered tensely. "Look at their faces." They weren't just running. They were fleeing for their lives. And then they saw it. At the corner of Fairfax and Oakwood, something emerged from the darkness, running on all 4s. A shapeless blur, fast, monstrously large. But it wasn't a dog, nor a man. It was something in between. Mark couldn't believe his own eyes. It had claws, a semi-human posture, black fur covering its entire body, and eyes that glowed unnaturally. A vivid, cruel, intelligent glow. "For God's sake, what is that?" Ethan whispered. The creature lunged at a man who had stumbled on the sidewalk. The scene that followed was like a nightmare. The monster pounced on him, drove its claws into his chest, and tore his flesh with animalistic brutality. The sound was sharp, thudding, and the man's screams stopped instantly. Mark took 2 steps back, feeling his stomach churn. Carlos screamed, "Run! Run! Now!" They started running along the sidewalk, shoving each other, tripping over LA's uneven curbs. The city's sounds were now filled with screams, sirens in the distance, scattered horns, and that sound, the scariest of all, the heavy pounding paws of the creature getting closer. "There's a 24-hour market on the next block," Mark shouted, breathless. "That big one on the corner?" Devon asked. "Yes, Evermart." The group ran as fast as they could, dodging fallen bodies, shattered glass, a man groaning in the middle of the street with a broken leg. The creature chased them. They could hear it. That labored breathing, those thunderous steps behind them. When they finally saw the Evermart entrance, the relief almost made Mark trip. The automatic doors were still open. "Go inside! Go! Go!" They all ran in. A security guard near the entrance, confused, got up from his chair, ready to ask something. But he didn't have time to react. The creature came through the door seconds later. It jumped on the man like a living shadow. He was thrown against the wall with such force that Mark heard the bones break before the body even hit the ground. And then, everything went dark. The store lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Silence took over. Even the vibration of the shelves ceased. All that remained was the moonlight streaming in through the skylights above, casting partial illumination on the aisles, and the distant sound of claws scraping the floor, entering, slowly, on the hunt. The darkness inside Evermart was oppressive. With the lights out, the only points of illumination came from the street, through the glass facade, and the skylights in the ceiling, where the full moon cast pale beams over long aisles and cluttered shelves. What had been an ordinary grocery store minutes earlier now felt like a nightmare labyrinth. Mark was crouched behind a display of cleaning products. His heart pounded, but he did everything to keep his breathing controlled. Beside him, Ethan crept slowly, eyes wide, trying to adjust his vision to the dim light. Carlos, Troy, and Devon were a bit farther ahead, frozen between the shelves in the frozen foods section. "Stay low," Mark whispered. No noise. None. Not a single wrong step. The sound of the front entrance being destroyed echoed behind them. Shattered glass. Twisted metal. They couldn't see, but they knew the thing had come in. And now, it was inside with them. "How is this even possible?" Devon murmured, swallowing hard. "What was that, Mark? That wasn't human." "I don't know. But if we screw this up now, no one's getting out alive," Mark replied in a hard tone. The creature began to move. They could hear it. Every step reverberated through the floor. Heavy, slow, as if it were deliberately hunting, sniffing, exploring the environment. Troy held a small kitchen knife he had grabbed from the utensil aisle. His hands trembled so badly, the blade rattled against the plastic packaging he carried. Mark crawled closer and placed a hand on his arm. "Put that crap away. You'll give yourself away before you even try to defend yourself." "I don't want to die here, man. I don't want to die." "Then shut up and move when I tell you." From the other side of the aisle, the sound of the creature's claws dragging on the floor returned. Closer now. Mark felt a chill run up his spine. The smell in the air had changed. A metallic, strong, sour odor, like meat left out in the sun. He held his breath. The creature passed beside them, only its shadow visible between the shelves. A monstrous quadrupedal silhouette moving with surgical slowness. Carlos was crouched, hiding behind a dead freezer, eyes locked on the shadow. Sweat poured down his face, his breathing heavy. Every second felt like a minute. And then something fell from Carlos's pocket. A keychain, small, but the sound was clear. The creature stopped immediately. It turned its head toward the sound and began walking toward it. Mark saw what was about to happen, but it was too late. Before he could whisper any warning, the creature leaped over the shelf, knocking everything around to the floor. The impact was so strong that packages flew in all directions. Carlos let out a muffled scream and tried to run, but the creature was faster. It grabbed him by the back, driving its claws into his shoulder. Carlos screamed in pain, the sound echoing through the store. "Get it off me, please!" The others could only watch, paralyzed. The werewolf dragged Carlos into one of the aisles like a spider carrying its prey. The scream was cut off by a wet, sudden sound. And then, nothing. Mark covered his mouth with his hand. Carlos was dead. And the noise that followed, the sound of flesh being torn apart, bones breaking, left no doubt that the creature was devouring what was left of him. Ethan trembled. Troy was in shock, eyes fixed on nothing. "We have to get out of here. Now," Ethan whispered. Mark shook his head. "The exit's on the other side. We won't get past there. He'll smell us, hear us. We need to think. We can't just run like idiots." "So what the hell do we do?" Troy whispered, a bit too loudly. The creature stopped eating. It had heard. Mark cursed silently, gestured for the others to scatter. The group split up into the aisles. Mark hid in the cleaning products section, crouched behind a stack of open boxes. Sweat dripped down his back. He couldn't stop thinking about the look on Carlos's face before being taken. And then he heard it. The creature's breathing. Close. Very close. With every second it drew nearer. A sour stench filled the air. Mark clenched his fists, closing his eyes for a second, trying not to faint. It stopped on the other side of the shelf. Mark barely breathed. Time felt frozen, until a noise from across the store drew the monster's attention. Something falling. Devin. He had knocked over a crate of sodas trying to change spots. The creature bolted toward the sound. Mark heard Devin scream, but he couldn't move. He stayed there, crouched, eyes watering, listening to the sounds of Devin trying to escape, the desperate cries for help. Then a sharp, final thud. The end. Another friend dead. 2 killed in under 15 minutes. Mark began to shake. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The Evermart was plunged into absolute silence. No more beeping registers, footsteps, not even the dripping leak in the back storeroom. Only the sound of Mark's own heartbeat, his ragged breathing, and the pulsing ache in his chest for not being able to help Carlos or Devin. From the original group, only 3 remained. Mark, Troy, and Ethan, and 2 of them were on the verge of collapse. Mark moved slowly, crouched through the cleaning supplies aisles. Each shelf felt like a fragile wall between him and whatever stalked in the shadows. Moonlight cut irregular patterns on the floor, creating visual traps that confused the senses. He stopped by the broom and mop section, the meeting point he'd agreed on if they managed to escape the creature. They were there, out of breath, faces sweaty and dust-covered. Troy's eyes were red, staring into nothing. Devin died screaming. "I heard it. That thing yanked him from behind the fridge like he was a grocery bag. I heard when..." He trailed off, his voice fading. Ethan put a hand on Troy's shoulder but said nothing. Mark, on the other hand, stayed focused. This isn't just an animal, not some irrational beast. It knows what it's doing. It's playing with us. "You mean, like a predator?" Ethan asked. "No, like a hunter in a closed territory. It's not in a hurry because it knows we have nowhere to run. This is a game to it, and we're the pieces." Troy trembled. "Don't say that, man. Don't talk like it's just a matter of time." "That's not what I'm saying," Mark replied firmly, locking eyes with both. "But if we don't start thinking, we'll die like the others. We need to arm ourselves, and we need to get out of this maze before it decides to end the game." Ethan nodded. He grabbed a piece of metal pipe from near the maintenance area. Troy clutched a box cutter like it would make any difference. Mark checked their surroundings. The path to the tools section was at the end of the gardening aisle, near the emergency exit. But getting there meant crossing the middle of the store. Open ground, lit only by irregular moonlight and with little cover. "We have to move slowly, quietly. One behind the other. If it shows up, scatter. Don't stop to help. Whoever falls, falls." "You serious?" Troy whispered, horrified. "You saw what it did to Carlos and Devin. If one stops, the others die too. That's the rule now." They began moving. They crossed the gardening section, passing bags of soil, fertilizer, and shovels. Mark in front, Ethan right behind, Troy closing the trio. Each step was measured. The floor creaked a few times underfoot. Mark felt like each noise echoed through the whole building. They reached a fork in the aisles. Left led to perishables, dark, full of refrigerators. Right led to the tools section. Mark stopped. "Right. Cover the sides while I move." But before they could move, a heavy sound echoed from the perishable section. The creature. It was there, close. The three froze in place. Mark heard the sound of claws dragging on the floor, slow, deliberate, as if the creature were savoring the moment. Its breathing was unmistakable, heavy, uneven, hungry. Behind the shelves. "Now," Mark whispered. They split. Mark dove between two pallets covered with open boxes. Ethan crouched near a broken freezer. Troy ran to a stack of pet food bags and threw himself behind. Silence reigned again. The creature moved between the aisles. Mark couldn't see it, but he could hear it. It was near, very near. Then, without warning, the shelves nearby began to shake. Something, or someone, had bumped into them. The sound came from Troy's direction, and then he heard it. "No. No, please." Troy's voice. A whisper of panic. The creature noticed. Mark heard a muffled roar, the sound of a body moving with brutality. And then, a scream. Troy tried to run but tripped over the bags. The creature reached him before he could get up. The impact was sharp. Mark didn't see it, but he heard everything. The sound of bones being crushed, the desperate groan cut short by sheer force, and the final sound. Absolute silence. Mark covered his face with his hand and bit his knuckles to keep from screaming. Ethan was a few meters ahead, trembling, his eyes filled with tears. Mark looked around. He knew the creature was still nearby. But now, only the two of them remained. The silence after Troy's death hit like a punch to the chest. Mark and Ethan stayed crouched for several minutes, motionless, surrounded by darkness and stacks of merchandise. The sound of the creature had vanished completely, as if it had blended into the store's shadows, waiting. All that remained now was the smell of blood, sweat, and the oxidized metal of bent shelves. Mark looked at Ethan. They were both covered in grime and blood that wasn't entirely theirs. The shock in Ethan's eyes made him almost unrecognizable. No longer the quiet, skeptical man from earlier. Only fear remained, pure and raw. "He's killing us like we're nothing," Ethan whispered. "We're still here. It's not over," Mark replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just us. And that thing. What do you think it is? Some experiment, some psycho, or Is it actually a damn monster? Mark didn't answer. He was trying not to think about it. Whatever it was, they weren't prepared to face it. But right now, figuring out what it was mattered less than finding a way to kill it. Or survive. We need weapons, Mark said. In the tools aisle. Let's move slow. Any sound now could cost us our lives. They moved silently, crawling between boxes, circling partially destroyed aisles. The back of the store, farther from the main entrance, had little used areas, with narrow paths between pallets of toilet paper, industrial cleaning supplies, and dusty appliances. Finally, they reached the tools and hardware section. The place was ransacked, but some items were still intact, hanging on racks or stacked in open boxes. Moonlight filtered through the skylights, reflecting off blades, wooden handles, and larger pieces wrapped in bubble wrap. Mark went straight to a toolbox and pulled out a large hammer. Ethan grabbed a handsaw. Then he found a rusty crowbar and held it like it was his only chance. You think this will work against that? It's not about killing it in one go. It's about hurting it. Buying time, creating distractions, making it miss. We have to become prey that fights back. Ethan took a deep breath, staring at the saw in his hands. His fingers were cut, dirty. Dried blood caked under his nails. Mark, do you think we're getting out of here alive? Mark looked at him. Didn't answer right away. Saying yes now would be almost a lie. But he needed Ethan functioning if they were to survive. If we stop trying, then yes, we die. But as long as we've got weapons in our hands, we still have a chance. All right. Ethan nodded, though without conviction. Then let's make this bastard work for it. They began setting up the area. They pushed boxes, built improvised obstacles. They positioned heavy tools close to one another in strategic spots. Mark grabbed a roll of electrical tape and fastened a knife to the side of the hammer, trying to turn it into something more lethal. The tension was almost unbearable. The absolute silence inside the supermarket was broken only by the occasional creak of the building's structure. And, every so often, a distant, dragging sound, like something scraping claws across the floor. They had no idea where the creature was. That was the worst part. When he comes, Mark began. He will come, Ethan cut in. Then when that happens, you don't run. Don't stop to think. If you get a chance to hit him, hit him. If you get a chance to run, run. But never stay in the same place. And if I go down, you don't come back. Go to hell, Ethan replied with a half smile. If you go down, I'll leave you, but only after throwing a box of nails at that bastard's back. Mark nodded. For a second, they shared a look that still carried a trace of humanity in the middle of that hell. A flicker of friendship in the eye of the storm. And then they heard it, the sound of shelves being dragged, heavy, slow. The creature was there, close. And now it knew they were preparing something. Mark slowly stood, the improvised hammer in his hands. Ethan held the crowbar. Both were sweating, eyes bloodshot with tension, muscles on the verge of giving out. The creature appeared from the shadows of the lighting section, tall, muscular, eyes reflecting what little light there was with a predator's gleam. It stopped for a moment, watching, sniffing the air. Then it took the first step. Mark stared back at the monster, his entire body bracing for the fight. Let's make this bastard bleed. The first thing Mark noticed when the creature emerged into the aisle was that it wasn't in a rush. The werewolf moved with the confidence of something that had already won. Dense muscles tightened under skin covered in black fur. Its claws dragged along the floor, leaving deep gouges in the cracked tiles. And its eyes, those eyes, scanned everything slowly, like it was studying the next moves of its prey. Mark raised the hammer with both hands. Ethan was to his right, behind a stack of boxes, crouched with the crowbar ready. They had set up a kind of improvised trap with metal objects, toppled shelves, and obstacles to make it harder for the monster to move. But now, looking at it, the setup seemed childish compared to the mass of pure violence staring them down. The creature stopped and waited, as if it wanted to see what they would do. Mark's throat went dry. "Don't attack. Not yet," he whispered. Ethan signaled that he understood. The tension in the air was absolute. Nothing moved except their chests, rising and falling. The sour, fetid, metallic smell of the monster spread through the air like a toxic gas. Mark felt its presence deep in his throat, like breathing in rotting meat. Then the creature lunged. It wasn't an impulsive leap, but a calculated advance, straight over the boxes. Mark rolled to the side at the last second. Ethan shouted and struck, landing the crowbar against the creature's side. The blow made it stagger, but not retreat. The sound of metal cutting into flesh was real, and for a second, Mark thought it might have worked. But the werewolf turned with brutal speed and hit Ethan with the back of its claw, like a crushing slap. Ethan's body flew into a gondola, knocking over shelves, boxes, and everything in the way. He hit the ground with a dry groan, writhing in pain. Mark didn't have time to think. He charged with the hammer, aiming for the creature's neck. He hit. The improvised blade cut the monster's skin, and a jet of dark blood sprayed across Mark's face. The werewolf roared, spinning and striking Mark in the shoulder. The force of the impact threw him against a workbench, knocking everything down. Pain exploded like fire in his arm. He fell to the floor, gasping, the hammer slipping from his hand. The monster turned toward Ethan. It was hurt, but still standing. The wounds it had taken didn't seem enough to stop it. It limped slightly, blood dripping down its ribs, but it still looked unstoppable. Ethan tried to get up, coughing blood, but the creature kicked him to the ground and drove one claw into his leg. The scream was suffocating. Mark crawled along the floor, ignoring the pain in his arm. He found the hammer. The blade still gleamed with the creature's blood. He got to his feet with difficulty, slipping in a red puddle, and shouted, "Hey! Over here, you bastard!" The creature turned its head slowly. It was about to drive the other claw into Ethan's chest, but stopped. It locked eyes with Mark, and it smiled. A chill ran down Mark's spine. It understood. With a violent move, the werewolf threw Ethan's body against a shelf, knocking him unconscious, and came for Mark. Mark ran. He weaved through the aisles, knocking over boxes, toppling whatever he could in the way. The sound of the creature following was constant, heavy, determined. Each step a warning that there would be no easy escape. He ducked into the gardening aisle and dove behind a fallen shelf. Stayed there, breathing hard, hammer clutched in his hands, his shoulder throbbing with pain. Silence. The creature had stopped. Mark didn't know where it was now, or how much time he had, but he knew one thing. They were running out of time and out of strength. And if they wanted to get out of that hell alive, the next fight would have to be the last. Mark leaned against the fallen shelf, panting, trying to control a body that threatened to collapse. His left arm barely responded. Blood slowly dripped from his forehead, mixing with cold sweat. Every muscle begged for rest, but he knew he couldn't stop. Stopping meant dying. Darkness still dominated the store. The moon had shifted in the sky, changing the beams of light that filtered through the skylights. Most of the space was now swallowed in shadow. Somewhere in those shadows, the thing still moved. For now. Silence. Mark crawled along the floor, rounding the gardening aisle back toward the tools section. On the way, he spotted Ethan's limp body slumped against the wall, partially covered by toppled bags of cement. His friend was still breathing, weakly, but alive. Mark approached slowly, checking the injuries. Ethan's leg was shredded, deep claw marks cutting all the way to the bone. His face was swollen from the blow, his breathing labored. "Ethan," Mark whispered, leaning close. "Hey, man. Listen to me." Ethan's eyes fluttered open slowly. He blinked several times as if trying to remember where he was. "Am I all in one piece?" he croaked. "More or less. But you're still here with me. We're not dying today, got it?" Ethan coughed blood. "Not sure I can move. Then I'll make it work. But you need to stay quiet. And if you can make any noise when I tell you, do it. It might save us." "You got a plan?" Mark looked around. "I'll find one. But first, I need a weapon that actually works." He knew the regular tools weren't enough. The improvised hammer had wounded the creature. But not enough. This thing was tougher than any animal. And there was something strange. The wounds seemed to close slowly. Regeneration. Whatever it was, it wouldn't die easy. Mark got up and began searching the tools section. The shelves were a mess, but there was a locked area behind a security grate, a spot for high-value tools, where the most dangerous items were kept. The door was half torn off. He stepped in carefully. What he found inside made him pause. An axe, different from the others. A thinner, polished blade, with an inscription marked at the base of the handle. "Silverline, cut through anything." Mark crouched and picked it up. It was heavy, balanced, and the blade felt unnaturally cold to the touch. He remembered. Silver. In the back of his mind, something clicked. Like the stories he'd heard as a kid. Cursed creatures. Wounds that only opened for real with silver. He wasn't sure if this was a werewolf, but if it was, this might be his only real chance. As he turned to leave, he heard wood splintering just a few feet away. The creature was close again. Mark held his breath. Stayed still, crouched behind a toppled cabinet. The werewolf crept down the side aisle, sniffing, following the trail of blood, sweat, and fear. He could hear its heavy breathing on the other side of the shelf, almost human, but deeper. The creature stopped there, silent, as if waiting for something too. Mark kept his eyes closed for a moment, forcing the panic down. One wrong move, and he'd be the next to be torn apart. But the creature didn't attack. It moved away. Heavy footsteps. More distant with each second. Mark went back to Ethan, who was trying to sit up. "Did you find anything?" Mark showed him the axe. "Silver. At least that's what the brand says." Ethan looked from the weapon to Mark. "You gonna take care of this?" Mark took a deep breath. "Not yet. But now we've got a real shot." "Then use it well, because I can't take another beating." Mark knelt beside him. "Stay here. I'll set a plan. I'll draw it to the other side of the store. When it comes for me, you make noise. Throw something. As soon as it turns, I'll try to hit it from behind." "You sure about this?" "No, but it's all we've got." Ethan smiled faintly, even with blood in his teeth. "Then go, man, and hit that monster for all of us." Mark crawled through the narrow aisle, the silver axe pressed to his chest, as if it were the only thing between him and death. Every step was a gamble. His body was wrecked from pain, but what hurt more was knowing this, all of this, still wasn't over. Ethan remained propped on the floor, hidden behind a stack of plastic-wrapped goods, leg outstretched, his face pale with pain. He watched his friend fade into the darkness, as if it were the last goodbye. Mark moved between aisles, dodging scattered products and fallen shelves. Darkness was almost total now, except for moonlight filtering through the skylights. casting cold beams that made more trouble than help. The monster's eyes would glow in that contrast. It was like hunting in a cave. The plan was simple, or so it seemed. Mark would be the bait. Lure the creature away from Ethan. When it focused on him, Ethan would provoke it from the other side with whatever noise he could make. That's if he had enough strength left to even lift an arm. And then, with the werewolf turned, Mark would use the only weapon that might hurt, or kill it for real. But it all depended on timing and precision. Mark stopped in the central aisle. The creature wasn't visible, but he felt its presence. Like a weight in the air, a constant sense of being watched. It was like having the crosshairs of an invisible predator on him. He gripped the axe handle tighter and raised his head. "Hey!" he said, firm, voice carrying through the store. "I'm right here, you bastard! Come and get me!" The sound echoed between the shelves. The silence that followed was even more unsettling. Nothing responded. Nothing moved. Mark walked a few more steps, stepping in a dried pool of blood. "Come on! What the hell now? You scared?" This time, the monster answered. A few aisles away, something heavy crashed into a shelf with violent force. Mark heard the structure fall. Products rolled across the floor. Claws tore at the tiles. The creature was moving hard and coming straight for him. Mark ran in the opposite direction, weaving between shelves and turning sharply at the end of the cleaning aisle. He left a trail on purpose, knocking over some cans of cleaner and a wet floor sign. If the creature was tracking by smell or sound, this would be one more trail to follow. He reached a junction where the aisle widened. There, he stopped. He gestured toward where Ethan should be hiding. He knew Ethan probably couldn't see, but he prayed he'd understood. He waited. 1 second, 2. Then, suddenly, from the other side of the store, a loud metallic crash. Something falling, clanging against shelves, rolling across the floor. Ethan had done his part. The creature reacted instantly. The footsteps coming toward Mark changed direction abruptly. He heard the shift of its weight, its body turning. It was headed for the sound. It was time. Mark moved. He slipped behind the shelves, silent, holding the axe with both hands, eyes adjusted to the dark, body wired tight. And then he saw it. The creature's back was turned, inspecting the noise. Its claws touched the scattered objects, its glowing eyes sweeping the floor. It bent down, sniffed, distracted. Mark closed in fast, raised the axe, aimed for the base of its neck, and swung with everything he had. The blade bit deep. The heavy sound of flesh and bone splitting filled the air. The creature howled in pain and whipped around violently. The axe stuck in its back. Mark was thrown aside with a heavy blow to the chest. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, and he hit the floor hard. The werewolf roared, thrashing, trying to reach the axe lodged in its flesh. Its legs moved, as if in agony. Mark struggled to get up. His vision blurred, breathing ragged. The force of the hit had left him dazed. And then it saw him. Even wounded, even with the silver blade buried in its back, it advanced. It lunged at Mark. He rolled at the last second, feeling the claws tear through the floor where he had been lying. The creature crashed beside him, snarling in pain. Mark staggered to his feet, bracing himself against a broken shelf. The werewolf turned toward him, eyes blazing with hatred. Blood dripped from its mouth. The wound from the axe still gushed, darkening its fur, but it was still standing. And Mark knew he had only succeeded in enraging it. His chest burned with each breath, like he'd inhaled glass. The blow had thrown him too far. He'd slammed into a toppled shelf, and now, as he tried to catch his breath, he could hear the creature moving again. It was still alive, even with the silver axe lodged in its back. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't made to die easily. The werewolf's breathing was ragged, like that of a furious bull. Blood ran down its sides, thick and dark. Yet it stood, unsteady, but steady enough. Its eyes locked on Mark with raw, savage, animal, and human hatred. For a moment, Mark saw more than just a beast. He saw something intelligent, cruel, conscious. And then it came at him again. Mark dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the claws. The strike tore through the shelf he'd been leaning on, ripping wood, steel, and products apart. He fell onto broken debris, cutting his arm and hip. The pain was sharp, but he ignored it. He had to find the axe. It was the only thing that had made any difference. He tried to get up, but the creature came from behind. No time. A swipe to his back sent him flying to the floor again. This time, he didn't move. The pain was overwhelming. His vision dimmed. But even lying there on the hard floor, surrounded by blood and wreckage, he heard something else. Ethan. "Hey, over here! Look at me, you bastard!" The voice came from across the section. Mark's eyes shot open. The creature's did too. It turned its head slowly, sniffing. The scent of blood, fear, and defiance mixed together. Ethan was standing, staggering, leaning on a metal pillar, holding the crowbar in one hand and a toolbox in the other. His eyes were wide, filled with pain and fury. "You want meat? Then come on. I'm still here." The creature hesitated for a second, as if considering. Then it charged. Mark tried to shout, tried to move. But everything hurt. Everything locked up. The creature tore across the aisle, knocking obstacles aside, leaping over shelves. Ethan tried to run, but fell to his knees. He knew he couldn't escape, but he didn't stop. The creature reached him. Mark heard the sound, the impact, the screams. Through the crooked shelves, he saw the monster fall on Ethan with unrestrained fury, claws moving, jaws opening. Ethan fought back. He landed a blow with the crowbar to the werewolf's head, making it roar and drive its claws into his abdomen in return. Blood burst into the air like a grotesque fountain. Mark screamed, crawled toward them. Every movement was agony, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let Ethan die alone. When he reached the spot, Ethan was already silent. His mutilated body lay on the floor, eyes glassy. The creature rose slowly, its chest heaving. Blood covered its face. Its eyes met Mark's. And he knew. It was just him now. The silence after Ethan's death wasn't the silence of suspense. It was the silence of loss. Mark was on his knees. In front of him, Ethan's body was twisted among shards of metal and pools of blood spreading slowly across the floor. His face still bore the frozen mask of pain at the moment of death. Eyes open, fixed on the cracked ceiling. A final sacrifice. A last act of courage. Mark's legs felt weak. His chest burned. Breathing was short, painful, erratic. His shirt was soaked in blood, some of it his own. He was losing too much, getting weaker by the minute. The creature lingered nearby, still sniffing, waiting, as if it knew the game was almost over. Mark looked around. There was blood everywhere. Destroyed products, twisted shelves, remains of bodies. The supermarket had turned into a killing arena, a concrete hunting ground where the monster had feasted. But among the chaos, Mark saw it. The axe. It had been thrown aside during the fight with Ethan, now lodged between fallen boxes, the silver blade still glinting faintly in the moonlight, pouring through the skylights. Mark stood, staggered, almost fell. Each step felt like dragging a ton. But he walked, because it was that, or die. When he reached the weapon, he gripped the handle with both hands, straining to pull it free. The blade had sunk deep into flesh before coming loose. He tugged once. Nothing. Pulled again, groaning with pain, until it finally came free. The axe was back in his hands, heavy, cold, sacred. This was the last chance. Either kill it, or be another body on the floor. Mark took a deep breath. Once. Twice. Then he dragged himself back to the central area of the store, where there was more space and more visibility. The creature appeared moments later, walking slowly, as if savoring the moment. Its eyes locked on Mark. Its animal breathing made its chest rise and fall like a raging bull's. Its paws left bloody tracks on the floor. Its claws dripped red, and its face still bore the stains of its last kills. But something was different now. A challenge. Mark stopped in the center of the open area, looked at the monster, and raised the axe. "Just us now. Just me and you bastard!" The creature growled, crouched, ready to leap. Mark didn't run, didn't dodge. He waited. Because this time, he had a plan. In the minutes before, he had gathered everything he could: bottles of alcohol, flammable products, exposed electrical cables, and an improvised bait made from packages of frozen meat and spilled blood. The area was set. When the creature sprang, Mark dove aside. It landed straight onto the trap. Mark, even injured, grabbed a bottle of alcohol and hurled it at the monster. Liquid exploded over its blood-stained body. Then he pulled out the lighter he'd taken from Ethan's pocket and lit it. Flames engulfed the monster instantly. The roar that came out of it made the whole store vibrate. It thrashed, screaming, collapsing over boxes, knocking shelves aside, trying to smother the flames with its own claws. Mark ran at it with the axe. The final charge. He jumped over the debris, lifted the weapon, and drove the blade into the creature's shoulder with all his strength. Then yanked it free and struck again, and again. The creature still tried to fight back, but the fire weakened it. The axe cut through skin, muscle, bone. Mark shouted with each blow, not out of rage, but pure desperation, until the creature toppled onto its side. Trembling, Mark, kneeling, stood one last time, and buried the axe at the base of its skull. The blade went in deep. The creature arched and stopped moving. The silence after the final strike wasn't the kind that brought relief. It was a heavy void, the kind of silence that feels like the end of the world. Mark was still standing by sheer miracle, filthy, bleeding, knees shaking. The axe still lodged in the creature's body. Blood ran down the handle, over his hands, mixing with his own. He took a step back and collapsed to his knees, feeling the adrenaline drain away. Everything hurt. Every part of his body screamed in agony. But he didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't say a word. He was in shock. The creature lay sprawled in front of him. Its body was burned in several places, fur charred. Yet there were still parts that remained recognizable. The massive teeth, the claws like knives, the eyes closed in an expression of agony. And then it began. The body convulsed. Mark instinctively stepped back, ready to strike again. But this wasn't a spasm of resistance. It was something different. The creature's skin began to tighten. Muscles shrank, fur disappearing, burned away or being absorbed. Claws receded and bones cracked and shifted back into place. The jaw, once monstrous, reformed into a human shape. Mark watched in absolute silence, horror changing its shape. What lay before him was no longer a creature. It was a man, naked, burned, bleeding, but human. An adult body, thin, with multiple old scars, like someone who had endured abuse, accidents, or perhaps other transformations before this one. The face, though partially deformed by burns, was still recognizable. Mark stared at it for several long seconds. It was someone ordinary. Someone you might pass on the street without a second glance. A man around 40, maybe younger. Old faded tattoos on his arm. A rusty wedding ring still stuck on his finger. His eyes were half open. And even in death, there was a strange expression on his face, a mix of relief and terror. Mark fell onto his back, staring at the supermarket ceiling, where the moonlight now seemed dimmer. His world had changed forever. That thing hadn't been a monster from hell. It had been a person. A person like anyone else, who, somehow, had become that. And if there was one, how many more were there? Mark closed his eyes. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, finally getting closer, but it was too late for help. All that was left now was the fear of what might come next. Waking up was worse than dying. Mark emerged from the darkness with a ragged scream that set the hospital equipment blaring. Heart monitors, beeps in quick succession, lights flashing in alarm. He sat up abruptly on the bed, his entire body covered in wires, and only then did the pain crash over him in waves. Broken ribs, deep stitched wounds, burned muscles, and a leg bandaged up to the knee. His hands were bound with sensors. An IV dripped slowly into his arm. He was pale, mouth dry, eyes wide. A doctor rushed in, followed by a nurse. "Calm down, Mr. Whitaker, calm down. You're in the hospital. You're safe now. Breathe, okay?" But Mark wasn't listening. He saw the ceiling. The same stained ceiling of the supermarket. The same angles. The same moonlight spilling through the broken skylight. He tried to rip away the wires, pulling at the tubes, until the nurse grabbed his hands. "Mark, calm down. You're at Cedars-Sinai. You're safe. You were found unconscious. You had severe injuries, but you're alive." Alive? Mark stopped. His heart still pounded, his eyes teary. He took a deep breath. For the first time since that night, he tried to believe he wasn't still in that hell. How many days?" he asked. 2. You spent almost 30 hours in surgery and the rest in a medically induced coma. You almost died, but you pulled through. Mark lay back slowly. His head throbbed. The last thing he saw before blacking out again was his own reflection in a side mirror. Pale, face aged, eyes hollow and filled with something that would never leave. Trauma. Hours later, a police officer entered the room, notebook in hand. A gray-haired man, skeptical, with a weary expression. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm Detective Jacob Morris, LAPD. I need to ask you a few questions, all right?" Mark didn't answer right away. The detective went on. "You were at the Evermart with 4 friends. 3 were found dead, 2 mutilated, 1 burned, cameras destroyed, electrical system damaged, and only you made it out alive. The security guard was also killed. We haven't identified the attacker yet. What happened in there?" Mark swallowed hard, looked at the officer, and for a second he considered telling the truth. But he knew the look he'd get, the same he'd seen in the nurse's eyes. Disbelief, judgment, the label of a madman. So he said, "An animal, big, like a dog. I don't know where it came from. It was dark. It killed my friends, one by one. I just got lucky." The detective scribbled something, unconvinced. "A dog? What kind of dog rips people in half?" Mark didn't answer. The officer sighed. "If you remember anything else, let me know." He left. Mark was alone in the room again. The world seemed to fade away, but now he saw it differently. He knew the truth. He knew he'd killed a man. But a man who became something else. And what if he wasn't the only one? What if it was a curse, a cycle? He couldn't sleep. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the werewolf's face, twisting, changing back to human. And he woke up sweating, hands trembling, as if he were back on that cold floor, waiting for the final blow. And deep down, he knew. It could happen again. Mark's night inside that Los Angeles supermarket stands as a grim testament to the thin line between man and monster, and the horror that can erupt when it's crossed. But this may not be the end. If such a creature could exist once, there's no telling when or where it might appear again. Like this video if you felt the tension of every shadow, and comment below which moment made your heart race the most. Share it with someone who needs to understand that some nightmares walk among us, hidden in plain sight. And above all, if you dare, subscribe to Mr. Midnight Horror and keep the alerts on, so the next time the darkness comes, you'll be ready.